All right, today we're going to talk about something that affects literally billions of people, yet is still surrounded by so much silence and, frankly, a lot of shame. We're talking about the herpes simplex virus. We're going to get into the reality of this virus, not as some rare disease, but as a super common and seriously misunderstood part of being human. Let's dive in. So let's just start with a number, a huge number. According to the World Health Organization, about 3.8 billion people under the age of 50 are walking around with herpes simplex virus type 1, or HSV-1. Yeah, you heard that right. That is more than half the entire world's population in that age group. It's a massive figure that just completely reframes this whole conversation right from the start.
So you might be asking, if it's that common, why isn't it something we talk about all the time? Well, the answer is actually pretty simple. The vast majority of herpes infections don't have any symptoms at all. Most people live their entire lives without a single sign, which, you guessed it, is a huge reason why the virus is so incredibly widespread. You can have it, you can pass it on, and have absolutely no clue.
And that brings us right into our first section. We're going to break down the numbers and the science behind what is, statistically, one of the most successful viruses on Earth. The whole point here is to try and close that huge gap between how incredibly common it is and how it's so often seen as something scary or shameful.
So let's break this down a bit. You've got two main types. There's HSV-1, which we usually think of as oral herpes or cold sores. That's the one affecting that whopping 3.8 billion people. But, and this is important, it can also cause genital herpes. Then you have HSV-2, which is the main cause of genital herpes, and that's sitting at around 520 million people worldwide. You add those up, and we're talking about over 4 billion people. Just let that sink in for a second.
Okay, so how does it get around? Well, HSV-1 mostly spreads through oral contact. Kissing, sharing a drink, that kind of thing. HSV-2 is pretty much only a sexually transmitted infection. But here is the absolute key, the most important thing to understand. For both types, you can pass it on even when there are no sores or symptoms in sight. It's called asymptomatic shedding, and it basically means the virus can be active on the skin and contagious even when the person carrying it feels totally fine.
All right, so we've covered the data, the hard science. But now, let's get real and talk about the human side of this. Because honestly, a herpes diagnosis is usually way less about the physical stuff and much, much more about the emotional gut punch.
And this is the million-dollar question, isn't it? We just established that billions of people have this virus. So what gives? Why does just hearing the word herpes come loaded with so much stigma and shame? Well, the answer has less to do with medicine and a whole lot more to do with how we as a society think about health and sex.
This quote from the American Sexual Health Association just hits the nail on the head. Our culture has this tendency to frame sexually transmitted infections not as a simple medical issue, but as some kind of moral failing. And that creates this totally false idea that having a chronic virus like herpes makes you unhealthy or damaged goods.
And because of that stigma, the initial emotional impact of a diagnosis can be just devastating. It's so common for people to feel this intense wave of embarrassment, shame, anger, even depression in those first few weeks and months. And those feelings are real, but it's crucial to remember they're caused by the stigma, not by the virus itself.
But here's the really important part, the good news. Those intense feelings, they fade. Research shows that adjusting is a process, and for most people, even just 6 months can make a world of difference. You start to see the virus for what it really is, a common, manageable skin condition, not a life sentence or some kind of scarlet letter.
Okay, so let's shift gears and talk about empowerment. In this section, we're going to look at the practical, effective tools we have right now to manage this thing, both the physical virus and the emotional side of it.
The American Sexual Health Association lays out some really great, actionable steps for coping. First, just acknowledge the stress. It is normal to be freaked out at first, so give yourself some grace. Next, keep perspective. Remember those billions of people we talked about? It's a common virus, not a character judgment. Finding support is also absolutely crucial, whether it's a friend you trust or support group. You are not alone in this. And finally, you have to challenge that big, scary assumption that this will ruin your love life. It won't. Millions and millions of couples navigate this successfully every single day.
Now, on the medical side of things, we've got some incredibly effective tools. Antiviral medications, and acyclovir is one of the most common ones, are really the gold standard for managing symptoms and outbreaks.
And the way acyclovir works is actually pretty brilliant. Think of it like this. The drug is basically asleep when you take it. It only wakes up and gets activated inside a cell that's actually infected with the herpes virus. A special enzyme that only the virus makes acts like a key, turning the drug on. Once it's activated, it messes up the virus's copy machine, stopping it from replicating. It's this incredibly specific targeting that makes it so effective with so few side effects.
It is super important to have realistic expectations, though. Here's what antivirals are great for. They can shorten outbreaks, make them less severe, and if you take them daily, they can even make outbreaks happen way less often. But here's what they can't do. They can't cure the infection. The virus is still there, just hiding out in your nerve cells, and they don't 100% prevent transmission, though they do lower the risk quite a bit.
And of course, while acyclovir is considered super safe, no drug is perfect. The more serious side effects, like kidney or nerve problems, are pretty rare and they usually happen in specific groups of people, like the elderly or folks who already have kidney issues where the drug can build up in their system.
So for decades, the whole story has been about managing this thing. But now we get to look at the horizon. Scientists are no longer just talking about treatment, they're talking about an actual cure.
But let's be real. Scientific progress is never a straight line from A to B. The road to a herpes cure is a perfect example of that. It's full of exciting ideas, but also some major challenges and, yeah, some setbacks.
For example, just this year in 2024, a big therapeutic vaccine trial from the pharma company GSK was stopped. It just didn't work as well as they'd hoped. And look, that's a bummer, for sure. But every attempt like this, even the ones that don't work out, give scientists valuable clues that help push the whole field forward.
And that brings us to something that sounds like it's straight out of science fiction: gene therapy. Unlike the pills or vaccines we've been talking about, gene therapy isn't about controlling the virus, it's about getting rid of it for good. The idea is to go in with these tiny molecular scissors and find the herpes DNA that's hiding in the nerve cells and just chop it up, disabling it forever.
So how well does this sci-fi approach actually work? Well, in the early lab experiments, this is the number that has everyone so incredibly excited: 97%.
This is all coming from some absolutely groundbreaking work over at the Fred Hutch Cancer Center. Scientists there created a gene therapy that in mice wiped out up to 97% of the latent herpes virus after an infection. And what's more, it also massively reduced viral shedding. This is a monumental step. It's the first real glimpse of a path to a true cure that could also stop transmission in its tracks.
And so that's where we are. Science is closing in, getting closer than ever to a real medical cure for the virus. And that leaves us with one last, really big question for all of us. As the scientists are working on curing the virus, can we, as a society, finally work on curing the stigma